Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. So hello and welcome. And today I am joined by the amazing Kate Trafford. And first of all, Kate, rather than me introduce you, why don't you introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are, what you do, but also your kind of profile and preferences in terms of personality?
Oh, thanks, Vicky. It's so good to be here. And so what do? I'm a master coach and speaker, TEDx speaker, author of the book Get There, Love Here. So I'm really passionate about helping busy professionals to achieve authentic, enjoyable and sustainable success. So my actual profile on the DISC profiling is I'm right on the boundary between yellow and green, that I and S aspect for those who know the DISC profile. So I love moving between the spaces of the speaking side of my work, engaging with my audiences, which is more yellow, and then of course the deep listening and reflective aspects of how I show up as a supportive green.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Very much all on the people side. And just obviously from knowing you through the PSA, which is the Professional Speaking Association, I've seen your work and I love your book. We may well touch on that as we go through this podcast. So in terms of profiling itself, let me just ask you, what's it like to be on the receiving end of Kate, your awareness?
Well, I think one of the wonderful things about profiling is I always refer to really good quality profiles as being shortcuts to insight. And I think the main thing that using various profiling tools has done for me over the years is it helped me to recognize and really own my natural talents, that I've then been able to cultivate through experience into fully deployable strengths, right? And I remember going back decades now, the very first one I ever did that really kind of rocked my world was Myers-Briggs. I did that when I was in my early 20s. I was working as an engineer in the nuclear industry, sitting in a corner, spreadsheeting away. And then I get this profile it's all about the yellow and the green, basically my profile. INFJ on Myers-Briggs. It's all about that yellow-green kind of mix. And it was all about people and connection and relationship and wanting to unleash the untapped potential in yourself and others. And I was sitting there just like going, oh my goodness, yes. And what you mean you can get paid for that kind of thing? And it kind of explained why sitting in a corner spreadsheeting was somewhat painful for me. But the aspects of my work even back then that I most enjoyed was collaboration and creative problem solving with other people. And it's really just evolved from there over the years. I think the opportunity to recognize and really own your talents, your predispositions, it makes the journey of growth and learning so much more joyful. And I think hopefully that yellow-green mix makes me a nice person and a warm, enjoyable, safe person to be with. You were saying, what's it like to be on the receiving end of you? Well, I think probably the main thing would be the high quality attention, right? We're so rarely in our fast-paced world on the receiving end of high quality attention. And I am fascinated by the people I meet and the people I have the privilege of working with. And I think that's that yellow-green mix.
It's about being present, isn't it? When you're there to be present. And I definitely think it has to come over to the yellow, green, the I, the S in terms of DISC terms. We naturally are present when we're with the people. But that's not to say that on the other side, the task focus, the D and the I can't be present. It's just that they probably have to work at that. Would you say a bit more than the I's and the S's?
100%. I think so. But it's all learnable. It can, we talk in DISC, don't we, about flexing,
Yeah.
which is cultivating those aspects of character and personality that don't come so easily or so naturally. So yes, for somebody who has that more dominant side, or that really kind of detail oriented, the C aspect, might need to flex in order to create that same level of connection and be the inspiring leader or contributor that they want to be. But the same has been true in the other direction for me. So the content of my work comes very naturally. I absolutely love what I do, but there are certain aspects that come with the territory of running a business that have not come so naturally for me. So the D side of prospecting and sales negotiation, the C side of doing my finances and VAT return, those, it's all part of being a well-rounded human being, a well-rounded professional. And we've all got our gifts, and we've all got areas that we'll need to cultivate if we want to be that well-rounded professional we aspire to be.
Definitely. It's definitely about the self-awareness.
Yeah.
So just picking up on what you said there and earlier about being in a corner doing a spreadsheet as an engineer, when you said that, I was like, well, knowing your profile, that it's not say like you're being well-rounded. We can all do different things. We can all flex ourselves and adapt our styles. But if you spend too much time doing something that doesn't come naturally, so for you, being an engineer in a room doing a spreadsheet, that to me says that must have been quite an exhausting time for you, putting yourself through that.
Definitely.
So how did you realize then, other than doing the Myers-Briggs, how long were you doing that role before you kind of thought this is not for me?
Well, I think there were those aha moments along the way, like when I did the Myers-Briggs and a few other things as well. But I think that it was a more gradual transition. So I went into engineering in the first place because for all the right reasons. It's just that I wasn't making fine enough distinctions. So when I looked, I was studying the sciences. I was studying maths, physics, chemistry, that kind of thing, which I did enjoy the intellectual challenge of that. But I didn't know myself well enough. Who knows themselves well enough at age 17 when we're making these like quite significant life decisions? I didn't know that wasn't. It was like, what are you good at? If from a subject's point of view, base your career on that. Nobody said to me, think about who you are as a person and what energizes you and what really lights up your soul. Nobody said that to me when I was 17. It was like, that's an excellent profession, Kate. Well done, go into that. And so I think what made it an appealing professional prospect for me was all of the photos, the imagery, etc., that I saw at the time of teams working together to collaborate something, solve problems, and that is still very much a part of the work that I do today, just in a very different kind of context, I guess. So it is exhausting. Inauthenticity is exhausting. Too much time spent doing something that's not really you is really, really draining. But the opposite is also true. There is work that is such a sweet fit for each of us that it doesn't even feel like work. And that's where I think profiling tools like DISC can be so powerful to help us to really think about what are the strengths and talents that when I deploy them, I'm actually energized by the work, right? So not only does it not cost me anything to do this work, it actually energizes me and helps me to feel fully alive, like the right woman in the right place at the right time. And that's what this is really all about, I think.
Almost definitely. It's about when people say to me, how do I know when I found my purpose? And I'm like, well, if we didn't need money to pay bills, if we didn't, and you could just work, would you still do what you're doing now? And if the answer's no, you haven't found your purpose. Whereas I know if I didn't need money, I would still do this because I love it.
100%, you and me both. And I agree with that. And I think that one of the ways of thinking about it is if you do something like the DISC profile, or I use quite a few different ones in my coaching work and for different reasons. If you really get that sort of self-discovery, self-awareness piece going, then the opportunity is for your work to become a kind of outlet for self-expression and contribution, and you get to recognize what it is that you're uniquely positioned to create and contribute. And that is absolutely thrilling. That, and so it's not necessarily about having a destination type of purpose. I want to create this, I want to achieve this, or whatever. It's more, I think, about alignment. It's like, do I regularly and routinely feel like the right person in the right place at the right time? Like there's some magic happening that wouldn't be happening if I wasn't in the room, right? And there's no arrogance in that. It's literally about wanting to make an impact, wanting to give the gifts you were given at birth and make that difference that you were born to make.
Oh, wonderful. I love it. I love talking with you, really. You just got one of those beautifully soft voices as well. I mean, when you said there about when you were at school, getting good grades. So I took my maths O level, showing my age now, and I took it a year early because I was very good at maths. And so therefore, I mean, engineering wasn't something because I wasn't very good at sciences. But because of that, I was, the banking world was where they kind of saw me, because you went to the careers teacher, didn't it? My careers teacher told me I'd come to nothing because I talked too much. God, honestly,
no, you talk for a living.
Talk for a living, exactly. Well, speaking wasn't a box to be ticked on a careers back then.
Exactly.
But I remember going into the bank. And I loved it. I spent my first 5 years working for, as they were, Midland Bank back then. And I loved that front of house, the cashier, the receptionist, everything. When I was stuck in the back office encoding checks, yes, people, that was a thing. We had checks and you had to encode the little numbers on the bottom of them. I found that so boring. But again, I never really knew why. So if somebody who's listening to this hasn't done profiling tools, what kind of advice would you give them as to how they find their purpose and what they do? And this is why I love your book. But if you could sum that up in terms of what would you do? What would you say, ask somebody to find their purpose?
Well, I think it's fair to acknowledge that very few of us are given these kinds of questions at school. I think it's come a long way, let me just say, since you and I were in that situation. But still, even now, the emphasis is on subjects, grades, and skills, and not really who you are as a person and core capabilities and authentic capacities, this kind of thing that you and I are exploring. So the good news is that even if you're listening to this now and you've never thought about this before at all, life has been constantly giving you clues. And all you have to do is to think back on the highlights of your career so far, right? Even if you're in a job that you don't love and you don't think is a sweet fit, there will have been moments when the work didn't feel like work. It might not have been part of your job description. If you'd been back office all of the time in your banking job, but then occasionally you'd got to go on a training course or something like that, you would have felt yourself light up, right? So I always encourage people is just to think about some kind of peak experience, some kind of experience of making a joyful contribution. In other words, you made a difference, but it was relatively effortless and enjoyable for you, and you could have just kept going, until the cows came home. That kind of moment, and then just reflect on what was true for you. What was the nature of the work? What do you have to be good at to have had that experience and contributed in that way? What values were in play? What was important to you that was inspiring and energizing you in that moment? And what did you feel good about in terms of the meaning of the contribution that you were making? And if you can come up with maybe even just 2 or 3 examples, it might be part of a job that you did that was ongoing, or it might have been an event or a moment in time. It doesn't matter. You just think about a few experiences and you ask the same questions. What was the nature of the work? what was my environment? How was I spending my time? What skills and capabilities were in play? How was I being led? How was I leading others? When you ask those kinds of reflective questions about a few different experiences, what you start to see is the patterns. What are the golden threads that run through all of those different experiences? And then you get to make a commitment that says, right, that's what I was bringing. That's what I was doing. That's how I was being as a person. I'm going to commit to do that more often, more fully, more consistently. Sometimes when you do that, as you know, Vicky, when you commit to bring your best self, your whole self to your work, then you are inspired towards an external goal. That's what I call a goal with soul, something so delicious that you work towards it and you accomplish it and you share that with the world. But it's enough of an empowering and inspiring purpose just to commit to bringing the best of yourself as fully and consistently as possible.
Oh, that's, do you know what, that again, just beautifully put, because I look and think to myself, when I've been out and delivered a masterclass or, done a conference, done a keynote, something else, I'm come back and I'm empowered, and I talk about it all the time, because I'm very much the extreme yellow. And so I love the peoply part of it, but I know that when I need to be my other side, when I need to be blue, when I need to, like you say, when you're running a business, when you need to do all of that, I make sure that it's a day when I wake up and I go, oh, I don't think I've ever woken up and go, oh, I want to do the books today. But when I'm in the mood of like, actually, I can do detail today, I will do it. So would you, I mean, in your book, you talk about that golden thread, because it's not just one thing, is it? It's not just about, you came home today and you were happy. Why was that? There's so much more to it. So do you want to just give us a little bit? I mean, you've given us there, but what's that deep part that we can ask ourselves that's not in our unconscious, that we can make our unconscious come forward to our conscious mind?
Absolutely. So there is a much longer answer to this, as you know, because it's all in the book. But here are the headlines. Really, is effortlessness is an indicator of authenticity. When you're just showing up spontaneously, when an opportunity comes up and you've said yes before you even have engaged your brain, those moments are big clues that your truest, deepest, wisest self is actually in play. Because there's no resistance. There's just no resistance in your system. So one of the things that can really help you to track that kind of thing over time is journaling. Right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the deep, reflective, I hope my grandchildren read this someday kind of. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about literally catching yourself being brilliant. Right? Just what went well today? What was the magical moment? What was it about that was so empowering and inspiring and uplifting for me? How did I make a difference today in a way that was enjoyable and meaningful for me? And it's capturing those smaller moments that often, that's when you can more clearly see the pattern. That's why in the book I say get a notebook and keep a travel log. I'm using this journey metaphor all the way through the book. Keep a travel log, because it's really over time that you start to see the patterns. Once you see the patterns at a high level, kind of big picture level, what starts to happen then is you make finer and finer distinctions. So, it's more nuanced, and it's like, oh, it's not quite like me with my engineering and problem solving. Yes, it was problem solving, but specifically it was about challenges, helping people overcome people challenges, whether that was internal, their relationship with their self and their growth, or whether it was actually interpersonal relationships, communication, influencing, and so on with others. So the more you kind of connect to these patterns in your own life and your own preferences, the more nuanced you can be and the more you can tailor your path from here.
Oh yeah, like you say, journaling is a fantastic thing. But because I don't have detail side of me, I was always like, oh, journaling's writing and I hate writing, I don't want to do detail. So I mean, and different styles will journal
Yes.
differently. But
Yes.
if you're dealing with, if your clients are very much on the opposite side to you, so you're on the peoply side, you're very
Yes.
much the I and the S, the yellow and the green, which is great because it's very peoply. And like you say, you can be extroverted, introverted, outgoing, reserved, depending on the situation. How
That's
is
it.
it? How do you adapt yourself to work with someone who's polar opposite to you?
Well, I think one of the great things about coaching, particularly if you do the self-awareness piece as a coach and you're constantly working on that through supervision or whatever, you get the awareness of where there is going to be a natural fit, a natural rapport, and where that might not be there in quite the same way. And then you work on your rapport skills, right? That ability to connect with anybody. And that's where an understanding of the overall disc model rather than just your own profile can be really, really powerful, because when you understand what it is that drives the behaviors and the choices, what's really important to each of these different personality types and so on, you can adapt and flex accordingly. But I think honestly, as a coach, I've come to appreciate that there is value in the coaching relationship, whether it is a match or a kind of opposites attract type of situation. So many of my coaching clients actually are technical professionals and they're leaders, right? That's my natural space that I operate in most of the time. And so I used to doubt my ability to work as effectively with certain personality types. But what I've understood is it's just that something different emerges in that relationship. So, there may well be areas for a D type, more of a dominant red personality, red leader, who really wants to move ahead at pace and really just gets frustrated when everybody else can't keep up. Come on, come on, come on, come on. That kind of thing is just actually what is the value of bringing other people along with you? Where does that not actually cost you time, but in the long run save you time? And that kind of thing. And with a more blue C type client, where I know that attention to detail and that sort of more task focused approach is going to be important, then I'm more mindful of process. I spend less time in the why something might matter and more time in the how to experiment and make a change and achieve efficiency gains, things that I know are important to my blue clients. So it's both the ability to flex, but also just to own and honor what it is that you bring as a coach, and just trust that that is of value, whoever you're working with.
Well, if you've got clients that are in the opposite spectrum to you, and that is where you generally work, obviously you are bringing value, because if you
Yes.
weren't bringing value, you wouldn't be getting more clients and repeat work, would you?
No, exactly.
So what would you say to somebody who has no self-awareness of their own style? And I think about, like, I know what I was like before I became self-aware. When I ask people who I worked with, ex-colleagues and ex-managers, people who were like me thought I was energetic and I was great to be around, I was fun. And people who weren't like me said I was exhausting and irritating. So, without asking the people, how can somebody find out without having to do the profiling about themselves and be aware?
Well, firstly, I would just say I don't think there's anything wrong with asking people, right? So, one of the things I think is a really good idea, whether it's as part of a performance review or career conversation, or whether it's just asking a trusted friend or colleague, what is it that you see in me that I'm doing really well and that is helpful? And then what is the thing that is perhaps holding me back, and if I did it differently would make the biggest difference? And one of the interesting things about strengths and preferences is that even if you don't feel comfortable, you don't want to ask other people right now, all you have to do is just reflect on the feedback that you've already had, like the examples you just gave, Vicky. So any strength that we overplay can become a weakness, right? So if you think about it, quite often, and it is more about other people's preferences and how they interplay with your own. There's no right or wrong here. But if somebody says, oh, you're a bit much, you're a bit full on for me, that kind of thing, then as well as respecting their preference and perhaps having the chance to adapt, you may also have the chance to notice that that was a strength in overdrive. Right. So it was just a bit too much. And actually, how can I grow and evolve by having different ways of connecting with other people, or different ways of getting the job done? Because I guess what we all really want is to be as effective as possible under a wide range of circumstances. And having that bit of flexibility in the mix can make a world of difference.
Oh, definitely. And like you say, it's a strength overused absolutely can become or be perceived as a weakness, especially to people who, again, are polar opposites to you. Because this is all about, as you say, there's no right or wrong. It's not labeling people. It's not an excuse for bad behavior. It's that recognizing, understanding, respecting that we're all different. And we talk about DISC, we talk about personalities. And yes, there's lots of profiling tools out there. My business, the foundation is DISC. And then you put the other layers on, don't you? So when you talk about values, because you can read people's personalities, can't you? When you start understanding it, your body language, the words they use, the terminology, but you can't read people's values.
No.
If I asked you, what would you say was, your top one, top two core values at the moment? I say at the moment because we know that values can change as well.
Well, they can, and it would depend if it was a work context or a whole life context that you were asking me about, Vicky. But the couple of things that would be common to both of those would be love and my love of learning. So, of course, how much do I love my job? I absolutely adore what I do. So those two things are always in play, regardless of the context that I'm in. And this is, I think, there are lots of reasons why it's invaluable to become more aware of your values and what's driving your behaviors and your choices, because they are the root of your motivation and inspiration. So if you want to be motivated, energized, really feel like you've got your mojo in play, then understanding your values can be really important and useful, right? But what I think is also really important to understand about values is sometimes what is the motivation direction, if you like. Am I driven because I'm so inspired and I can't wait to create and experience this thing in the future, or be very present right now? Or actually, am I unhappy with my life as it is right now, or my work and my job as it is right now, and I'm actually energized because I'm trying to get away from something? And having that level of understanding, whether you're being driven by fear or whether you're being driven by love and appreciation, not only does that impact in terms of the quality of the work that you do, but it absolutely determines the quality of the experience you have along the way. Are you driving hard or are you driving happy?
That's a good way to say, yeah, driving hard or happy. So if anybody that's listening to this perhaps has that horrible, Sunday night feeling of like, oh, I hate my job, I hate Mondays, what advice would you give to them?
Absolutely. Well, I've got a client right now, actually, who calls that the Sunday night scaries, which was exactly where he was at when we first started working together. And it's incredibly common, especially if you're in a demanding role that just feels relentless, right? If it just feels overwhelming and relentless, then the Sunday night scaries can be a very real thing. So the key to that is to be willing to take stock. And if you've got a trusted advisor within the business, that might be a peer, it might be a mentor who you can have, you really need confidentiality for this level of reflection, but it might be an internal mentor if that level of trust is there. It might be working with an external coach or a family member, a friend, but ideally with a skilled helper, if at all possible. And they can help you to take stock of what is working for you and what is not working for you, and how to dig yourself out from under that feeling. Most of us have been on a lot of conditioning over the years around what success requires, that success requires sacrifice, right? It's supposed to be hard. You've got to earn every single penny and every moment of recognition. But actually, when you use tools like profiling tools and self-reflective exercises, you can get to a place where you understand yourself and your sweet spot, your zone of genius so well that you can make an extraordinary contribution and it costs you relatively little. In fact, as we were saying, the great majority of what you do might be very energizing for you as well as high contributing for the world. So it takes a little bit of time, it takes headspace, it takes reflection, and that's something that your listeners may not feel like they have a lot of. But start somewhere. Just sacrifice one episode of Netflix in favor of a little bit of thinking time out for a walk one evening or whatever. Just start small and just trust that it is possible. It's entirely possible to earn a living and make a difference doing something that you actually love and that is totally you-shaped. But you have to do the journey of self-discovery first before you can really implement that on the outside as your new authentic path.
Oh, and that's summed up so well. It is that do what you love what you do. And I know in your book, it's that whole, putting happiness on the other side of a thing, of a goal. Yes. It's just not a way to carry on with life.
No, exactly. If you're constantly saying, I'll be happy when I get that next promotion, I'll be happy when I've got a certain amount of money in the bank, or when I've achieved this accomplishment or whatever, that I'll be happy when pattern can run for the rest of your life. Because usually as we get even reasonably close to what was the original goal, we can already see the new thing that we think needs to be true in order for us to be happy. So we don't even celebrate the thing that we've just achieved. We're just relieved to have got it over the line, and we're already on with the next thing. So we have to turn that equation around and recognize that success is not all about achievement. Achievement is in the mix, but it's actually about making that contribution, achieving things joyfully in a way that is meaningful and deeply satisfying along the way. And not only is that's not just a nice to have in terms of, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we were all loving the journey? It's not just a nice to have, it's actually a high performance state. And anybody listening to this right now, just think about how much more you would be able to achieve and contribute if you were feeling confident now, happy now, inspired now, not waiting for those experiences on the other side of the next big achievement.
Oh, definitely. Be happy in the now. I mean, it's amazing. And like you say, it's love here. Get there, love here is your title of your book. Yes. So I just think, I mean, I would highly recommend that, not just because you're on my podcast, but because I have read it.
Yes, thank you.
And whilst I could probably ask you a ton more questions, I'm gonna wrap it up as to where it is, because you've given so much value, Kate. Thank you so much. I suppose really I just want to say for our listeners, if they want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you, Kate?
Oh, well, I would love to hear from any of your listeners, especially if they have any kind of questions and they just want to follow up on anything we've explored together today. So my website is katetrafford.com, but the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, Kate Trafford FPSA, and I would love to connect and follow up if anybody would welcome that.
Fabulous. And I'll make sure that all your links are in the show notes as well.
Thank
Kate,
you.
It's been an absolute joy to have you on It Starts With You. And thank you for being here. I hope you've listened. I hope you've got lots out of this, listeners. And we will finish the show. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. And also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.